Hello there. For all of you who are new, my name's Courtney. I am the CEO of Plant Medicine People, and I have been working with ayahuasca for 20 plus years and followed the path of an Ayahuasquera for the majority of that. It took me a couple of years when I first met the medicine to actually admit that I had a calling to learn how to be a facilitator, because I kind of felt like, what does a white girl from Montana know about sitting behind the altar of a sacred medicine? And truth be told, I know nothing. And even now, I know very little. But I got really incredibly fortunate that I found a couple of profoundly gifted and amazing teachers along the way, and apprenticed for about a decade. And for the last decade, have been doing my own thing in various places and centers. And I have some confessions. I kind of felt like, well, the spirit of this is the wisdom that ayahuasca has shared with me around transparency. And that if we're not transparent and honest with the people that we work with the people that are in our community, then especially in roles of leadership, we become hardened, we become unseen, and we become hypnotized by our spiritual egos. And I don't want that, because I've seen the repercussions of that, and it's really, really ugly. So some confessions, and I share this also not just from the spirit of transparency, but also to be relatable. That, you know, if any of what I'm sharing is true for you in your journey, then you can know you're not alone. The first thing that comes to mind or to my heart that feels important to share is I'm still very much afraid of not so much ayahuasca herself, but the spaces that she takes me to. I trust Mama. I love this medicine with every cell of my being. She saved my life. She is my friend, my teacher, my mother, my confidant, my taskmaster, my partner, and really everything that I do. But man, I am so humbled by her strength. And I'm so humbled by the power of the resistance that still exists within me. There's just a certain vibration of darkness, for lack of a better term, that scares the heck out of me. And I resist sometimes to the point of feeling like I am going mad. That's what resistance does. But I would love to say that, 20 years in, it gets easier and I'm no longer remotely afraid, but that just isn't reality. Another confession I have to share is that, man, sometimes this job, it pushes me to the edge and makes me question, do I still want to do it? I kind of feel like I don't trust facilitators that don't go through some level of reluctance or even existential crisis around it, because it's one hell of a job. The two things that get me the most are the responsibility and just the heaviness of that. Sometimes it's a blessing, but also just knowing how potent the medicine is and the states of consciousness it can bring people into. It is an awesome responsibility to stand for people and keep them safe and show up. And what is hardest for me around that is often the reflections or the projections that other people have. It's of course really hard to hear when people don't like what happens in my circle, or they blame me for something that they're going through, and they're not always wrong by any means. Just that consistent willingness to do shadow work and to take on other people's projections, be they pedestals or criticisms, everything in between. It's a lot. And the other thing that hurts my heart a lot about doing this work is just around the spiritual community as a whole. I love to be in community, but any of us that have been in community, we know it's part of our shadow work. It's part of the process of self-discovery. And I guess what hurts me the most is because medicine work is so vast in its dynamic nature, and the fact that we're all learning and growing all the time, a lot of relationships drift apart. I call it the revolving door. I've lost a lot of people, or I should say, lost isn't the right word, because, it was divinely orchestrated, but it feels that way. A lot of people that I loved dearly, that for one reason or another, nobody being right or wrong, no blame, there's separation. And it happens all too frequently in this space, just because of the dynamic nature. And maybe it also happens, if I'm being honest about my shadow, is that I have very high expectations for myself and others, and something I'm still looking at and working on. But that is a deep confession. That is one of the hardest parts about this work. And the last thing I'll mention or confess is I still go through imposter syndrome. I still go through the what does this white girl know about Indigenous teachings? And, you know, I can be very honest and say very little, as I said before, but I know enough and I've had enough experience, and more than anything, I know that I'm deeply called and I can't get around that, but I still deal with plenty of insecurity. It still crushes me, you know, if I get a certain flavor of social media nasty comment. It just is like I pour myself into people and it doesn't always work out well, and sometimes they have valid and sometimes projected criticisms, and it's not easy to sit with, and it pushes upon the insecurity that I'm still very much working on healing. So it turns out this path is not about finding a space of perfection. I think it's more about transparency and integrity than anything else. And on those two things, I'm doing okay. And so that feels good. Thank you with my whole heart for listening to this. Send me your confessions if you would be so bold. Is anything you want to share in comments. And please follow this channel, Plant Medicine People, if you haven't already. We'll have more content like this very soon. Be well out there, everybody. So much love.